right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This will be part of our Operation Summer Series webinars, and this one will be on critical infrastructure operations. We're really excited to do this one. It's a subject I think gets missed a lot in drone use. We hear a lot of public safety, inspections sometimes secondary to that. So this is a really good topic for us. We're excited to talk about it with you guys, and we've got some good speakers on today to help us out with it. We did do our law enforcement and fire rescue webinars earlier this summer. Those are available on our YouTube if you'd like to go check them out. Also, be sure to follow us on social media. So any future webinars we do, you'll be able to make sure you check those off and know that they're coming your way. This will be recorded and also be put on our YouTube after this, so make sure you go check that out. There will be a couple of videos in the YouTube version that are not in this. Videos tend to not translate well over webinar, so make sure to go check those out. There is a questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to ask us any questions you may have or comments throughout the webinar. We will be answering those at the end of the webinar, so we look forward to hearing from you on some different topics. My name is Justin Swartz. I work in business development here at FLYMOTION. We kind of created this webinar to be able to bring people who have made large strides in different areas of drone use, whether it be public safety, private industry, and we've got John with us today. I'll have him introduce himself in a minute. But we're very lucky today. We also have Ryan English, our CEO, on the webinar with us. Ryan, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Appreciate it. Glad to be on. As Justin stated, my name is Ryan English. I'm the CEO, co-founder of FLYMOTION. We started the company a little over 6.5 years ago. And a little bit about my background is I come from the public safety and military. Pretty much have served my whole life prior to co-founding FLYMOTION. It's one of the missions, obviously, that we do as a company, is providing end-to-end technology solutions to public safety, government, defense, and critical infrastructure. So, we really have over the past several years really defined ourselves as an industry leader and are really producing some innovative products and solutions to organizations and agencies around the country. Not only solutions and services, but also training. And we'll talk about some of that later in the presentation. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for joining. And we also have John McClain from Shell. We asked him to be on. Main purpose of this webinar is to bring information to you guys. Yes, we sell equipment. Yes, we do training, and we're happy to help with any of that. But one of our main goals from this is just to bring awareness to the community of what possibilities are out there with new technology. So, John, if you would introduce yourself.
Thank you, Justin, and also thank you, Ryan, for inviting me to be a part of today's webinar. So as mentioned, I'm John McClain. I'm a security specialist by day and the chief drone pilot at night for Shell Deer Park Refining Company, located here in Deer Park, which is about 20 to 30 minutes south of downtown Houston. Chemical and refinery complex, 2,700 acres, which about 1,900 are developed. Besides being the chief pilot here at Shell Deer Park, I'm also an advisory board member of the Energy, Drone, and Robotics Coalition, and also I'm on my second year as being the chair of a UAV drone subcommittee under the U.S. Coast Guard Sector Houston-Galveston Area Maritime Security Committee.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, John. We've definitely got the Coast Guard represented here with you and Ryan. That's good to hear. We're going to go ahead and get started here. And I think John's going to talk just a little bit about his program, what they do, and some of their use cases.
About 4 years ago, Shell Deer Park was looking into starting a drone program. Matter of fact, here in just about a week or two, we will be on our 4-year anniversary from the brainstorming and funding efforts into actually where we got drones and started flying. So year to date, we have about 945 flights, equal out to 219 flight hours. The program as a whole has been through the Argus rating process for the SOPs, and we have received a gold rating. Myself as a pilot, I've been through the AUVSI top program, and I've received my level 1 certification, and all I'm lacking for my level 2 is to go and actually do the flight, which has been kind of hard to coordinate here with the times we were in here in 2020. Last year, we also did a signed memorandum of understanding with DGI, so we are now a DGI enterprise partner. Some of our accomplishments and greatest highlights from the program over the last 4 years is our response to Harvey, which we'll talk about here in a minute or two. We were the primary drone that responded to the ITC fires about 2.5 years ago for CIMA, which is the Houston Greater Area Mutual Aid System, and CIMA is Channel Industrial Mutual Aid. The team focuses mainly on visual inspections and also emergency response. So some use case scenarios that we'll talk about that the team has been involved with, and like I've already mentioned, mutual response. So these are just some snapshots from the fire from ITC, going from the upper left and kind of going around. You can see where we were set up pretty right close to the fire. We were able to, from this location, live stream information back to the incident command. That information was used to monitor the progression of the fire, make sure the equipment was still set up in the right spots, and just to do some confirmation on that. Towards the end of the response, we were tasked to special attack teams. We used the Zoom capability. On this one, we used a 210 version 1 with a Z30, and we were able to use that Z30 and kind of zoom in and find where the holes and the kind of the nooks and crannies had developed in the tanks. And then those hose teams were able to attack that fire, with the foam and get those tanks out. And then towards the very end, something we'll talk about a little bit further on our Harvey response, a tactic that we developed during Harvey. I actually had a representative from command looking over my shoulder as they were directing in the last foam applications to actually put out the last few tanks. As you can see in the upper right, once the fire was tapped out, we used the thermal camera. This was an XT2. Using the thermals, we were able to see what product levels were still left in the tanks. They were having to gravity feed these tanks. So when the fire was still going, we were trying this technique. We were able to get a few levels, but with just the heat of the fire. And as you can see on the bottom right is how big as it got. That would be as a morning of day 3 after kind of one right after another, 3 tanks collapsed. It was kind of hard to use the thermal to get those tank levels. But once the fire was tapped out, we got it crystal clear and they were able to get those levels. And then on the bottom left, another thing that we used from Harvey is this is kind of a picture demonstrating on how the drone was used to monitor the integrity of the foam blanket. And then as it was time, as the foam broke down, we would use the drone to monitor the reapplication. So just the right amount of foam was used to reapplicate and reestablish that blanket because this incident did tap into the National Foam Reserve. So just some capabilities of showing of the Z30, Zenmu Z30 zoom camera. This is a fairly large steam leak that we had here at Shell Deer Park. It was an all-day event. The 2 pictures on the left, the engineers that were kind of monitoring this situation wanted us to take these exact 2 pictures every 30 minutes so they could do the calculations on if the leak was getting better, or the more concern was, as you can see on the upper right, the actual steam was impinging on a line that had some pretty nasty stuff in it. And the concern was if they weren't able to block in that steam within the right amount of hours, the steam leak would go ahead and just tear apart that expansion joint, which would then take out that almost entire pipe rack. So we used these 2 angles, and of course, 3 years ago, it's not like some items that will be discussed later on here on the capabilities of DJI's newest drone. So we were taking these images by GPS location and angles, pitch angles that we had last left the camera, and trying to repeat those every 30 minutes. And then, as you can see on the bottom right, the actual hole in the expansion joint that we were able to take. And, these images 3 years ago was pretty eye-opening and wowing of the capabilities of the zoom camera. So some regular inspections that we do, these are examples of the top of some external floating roofs. We started off, this was one of our very first missions 4 years ago, and how it was started off is we would do a inspection of, at that time, 52 external floating roofs after a 2-inch rain event in a 24-hour period. We did that for about 6 months, and then it turned into now where every Monday morning we go out and we fly 47 floating roofs, and Tuesday morning the logistic and the maintenance folks get together. They have those videos split up, and those different groups review the 4K videos, and then any issues they find, that's how they plan their maintenance for the rest of the week. Also good examples of the zoom capability. Annually, our pressure equipment inspection group, they do the flare inspections, so we have taken that over in-house also. So now a person on my drone team is a heat transfer specialist from the PEI department, and now he's able to go out and use the drone, the flare camera, and the zoom camera to go in and do the entire inspection using the drone, instead of people having to crawl up and down the structure and taking pictures and whatnot. So we do this annually, or if there's any issues, so say a steam leak or some insulation is missing, we can go out with the drone and take pictures of that. We can also use the FLIR camera to confirm from time to time they'll have pilot issues. We can confirm with the FLIR that the pilots are lit or they're not lit. So our first greatest win with our drone program was the post-Hurricane Harvey response. So as our program started and still drones weren't in the popular eye yet, basically the program owner and the program holder and myself as chief pilots, we were basically knocking on leadership doors and telling them, hey, have you heard of our drone program? Do you know the capabilities of our program? Please let us set up a demo for you. So you can see our capabilities, so you can start using us. About 5 months later, we had Hurricane Harvey. In 2 weeks, we had the attention of the entire site leadership. So basically 14 days with 5 pilots, 4 drones. We did 132 flights, equaling out to 658 minutes of flight time and video. For cases like this, that's pictured. In this picture here on the top, you have the Houston Ship Channel to the left, and you can see that the Houston Ship Channel has basically taken over. That would be our north perimeter of our property into a couple of tank farms. There was no way to access anything back in this area. There was a substation, a brand new substation that was kind of they were concerned about, which is pictured on the bottom, kind of lit up towards the top. You can also see, if you look at a couple of angles of a few of those tanks, you can see they have floated off their foundation towards the back, which isn't pictured. Well, actually, the top image there towards the middle, you have a kind of a red dot. That's a vacuum truck that has been submerged. On other presentations, I have a little bit better picture of that. Just below that, a little bit south, there's some pot tanks that are knocked over and the sheen coming off of it. And then towards that older looking tank, we'll call it that, just a little bit right of the ship, you have 3 frac tanks that have been knocked over. And with the drone getting these images where no one else could come back in this area and find out, the emergency response team, the engineers, the site leadership was able to start putting plans together to start the cleanup and securing these items that were knocked over, and get the cleanup going once the water receded. Also, some stuff I didn't picture there in Harvey. We had a few floating roofs that sank during Harvey, and some techniques that we had to develop with that is the foam application to suppress the vapors of the product. As you can see from these images here, Shell Deer Park basically was turned into an island. So what foam we had on site was all the foam that we had, and that was for also about the time period of 2 weeks. So we needed foam to suppress vapors on 3 floating roof tanks, and then we had a pinhole leak on another tank that we had to use foam to suppress that leak. We used techniques where exactly like I explained for the ITC fires. We were able to monitor the foam blanket with the drone, and then the reapplication of the foam was also monitored via the drone and the team lead doing that application. So just the precise amount of foam was used to reestablish that foam blanket. We're also very involved in the community and also our site external relations. So we have been a part of a few leadership forums, not just leadership here in the Americas, but also the entire leadership of corporate Shell, of Royal Dutch Shell. And so one neat thing we did for one of the manufacturer leadership forums a couple of years ago is we took the president of Shell Oil outside with us, and we set up a drone live stream showing me and the president of Shell Oil outside, and they did a presentation via live stream to the rest of the leadership that was inside, conference room, and did question Q&A and stuff like that, and that was a big hit. We've done several internal Shell Deer Park commercials. Where pretty much 95% of the commercial is drone video. And then we did a safety day video called Follow a Barrel of Crude, which basically takes the barrel of crude from the crude ship all the way through the dispatching tank farms, through the distilling process, goes through different phases in the refinery and the chemical plant, to finished products. In the community, we've done some security stuff with the police department here in Deer Park. They have an annual fun run, which we get some good 4K video of the runners, some things at the start-finish line, and little items like that they can use for promotional video and pictures for next year's event. And also I'm supporting 2 of the local STEM programs here in the Houston area that are closer to me here in Deer Park. And with them, I've invited them out to the site. We've done some drone missions together, all the way from the planning phase all the way to the post phase. I've been to a couple of their robotics competitions just for support and some pep talks. Another one, so here in Texas, by the 8th grade, a student has to choose a career path that will go through and start in high school. So one of the school districts where I'm supporting their STEM program, towards the end of 8th grade, they have a program that they bring in different career paths, and they invited us to show them drones because one of the career paths in this ISD is robotics, which includes drones. So just to show you the drones that we have used in the past and where we are now. So we started with 2 consumer drones, pro-consumer drones, the Inspire 1 pictured to the left and the Phantom 4 to the right. The Phantom 4s were quickly known during Harvey as the workhorses of Harvey. So the site leadership pretty much right away, even though the winds, there was still rain and winds were still at 40 miles an hour gusting, wanted to get the drones in the air to start finding stuff, especially the flooded areas and what we found, as I've already explained. So we got hold of DJI, reassured them we weren't going to hold them to any of their warranties or whatnot, asked them how we could semi-waterproof the Phantom 4. They gave us some suggestions, and we followed those suggestions, and the Phantom 4 handled rain, the wind, in sports mode, not regular mode, sports mode, 40 mile an hour gust with no issues, and we got a good jump start on getting the recovery effort going, finding the damages. Also during Harvey, we lost the site's nitrogen feed pretty much right off the bat. So several units in the refinery, their fin fans, the cooling kind of fans for the process overheated. So before they could restart those units, per the process safety review, All their fin fans had to be inspected. So by that time, we had a Matrice 200, and with the Z30, we were able to inspect 273 fin fans within 2.5 days and check that box for the refinery so they could do the startup process. Which usually that would have included operators, outside operators, engineers, and inspectors climbing into the units, getting above the fin fans, or building scaffold, setting up cranes, to get the different angles, which would have took weeks. And we were able to do 273 in 2.5 days. So we no longer use the Inspire 1 and Phantom 4. We have moved to strictly the enterprise products. So the different drones pictured here, as most of you might recognize them, on top we have the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual. We use that for mainly our tank inspections that we do weekly because it's a quick setup, and we're moving into seven different takeoff zones. So it's easy for the foldability of the Mavic to move to next spot. There in the middle on the left. We now have M210 RTK version 2 and an M210 version 2. So the RTK, we also have the base station that goes along with it. Pictured there on the bottom, we were one of the first to receive, and we have started using the new M300. Really want to get my hand on that spotlight there, pictured down there on the right, but we do have the new H20. And my opinion, the new H20 blows away the Z30. Have some examples of, so just some kind of playing around examples. I wear a medical bracelet, did a wide angle shot from about 150 feet away where you really couldn't even make out the patches on my FRCs. Moved into the digital zoom on the H20 and got a crystal clear HD image of my medical bracelet. That the Z30, there's no way that the Z30 could have got that. In a minute or two, we'll be talking more about the M300 and the H20 and H20T, so I won't go into too much on that. But also pictured there in the middle, affectionately, as we call it, the Death Star, but officially known as the Flyability Helios 2 for internal inspections on vessel and tanks, unaided GPS stability, where this company has developed an algorithm that uses laser measurement that the drone takes from all four corners and basically keeps the drone stable. A lot better version of the Helios than the Helios 1, which you truly had to be a pilot to get any sort of images out of that thing. The Helios 2, great improvement on that system. We don't use it quite as often as I thought we would, but still a very good tool for anything internal where GPS cannot help you with stability and stable flight. And I believe that is pretty much the end of what I got. I'll be happy to take any questions when it comes to Q&A time if you have any specific questions, but otherwise, let's continue on.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. We'll bring you back in a few minutes to talk about that 300 and some good things Ryan and I are going to hit on here. So moving into FLYMOTION, I'll let Ryan take over. He's going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and some experience that we've had working very closely with critical infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Our motto and really our tagline of the company is supporting those who serve. And obviously that, is across public safety, government, defense, critical infrastructure, and stuff. We've been working with agencies and organizations, hundreds of them for years now across the country, and are a leading provider of technology solutions and services to those verticals. Really our teams, at the end of the day, our team's commitment, continues to drive that message home and continue supporting those in providing, innovative solutions to them. We are a veteran-owned company. One thing that is unique, I think, about FLYMOTION is we're a hybrid in the sense that we have not only our technology solutions that we provide, but we also have a service operational component of our business. So where we're deploying to real world disasters, assisting a variety of different government agencies in security type operations and such. And so what that allows us really to do is to not only have the technology and be providing those solutions to customers, but really be able to put that stuff internally through real world operations. And we've supported a variety of different high scale, high profile operations. Those are things that those of you that follow our social media and stuff. Typically, you're not going to see that stuff on there for obvious reasons, but we are out there, helping to assist those different agencies and organizations around the country. One of the things that I think our team really excels at is really looking at a challenge and working to provide or build out, integrate, develop a solution. And we've brought some very innovative technologies. One is pictured there, which is that particular vehicle is what we call our Trident series, one of our mobile command centers. We're the first company in the world to introduce a mobile UAS dedicated command center vehicle. And that was roughly about 5 or so years ago. I can remember clearly when we introduced that out at CES, people were just scratching their heads going, what are these guys doing here? We were very early on. And I think that's one of the things that FLYMOTION has been very successful in, is really creating the trends and the innovations for the industry rather than following the path of others. So one of the things I want to talk about is when we're looking at critical infrastructure is Hurricane Irma response. So Hurricane Irma, 2017, so about 3 years ago, and we are back in our annual hurricane season again. That won't end until first part of November. So we'll see what happens this year. But drone technology, was obviously out there, but it was not near as prolific as we see today. So 2017 brought some very unique challenges that, the industry as a whole, also us and our service operational side of the business had never experienced before. Fortunately, many of our staff, including myself, we do come from a public safety and or government or defense background. So we have decades of experience internally with our staff of responding to incidents, real world operations, and things of that nature. So I think that really allowed us to be successful in our response to Hurricane Irma. Obviously, Hurricane Irma spun up. We hold several disaster response contracts with critical infrastructure. We were contacted to put our teams on standby. And so went ahead and did that. We had a total of 22 teams that were deployed for Hurricane Irma over a 14-day period. So initially we anticipated only deploying for roughly a few days, 3-4 days. We had told our staff, hey, prepare for roughly about a week or so. But that ended up turning into a 14-day operation. And there was a lot of challenges that I think our team was very successful in overcoming during that time period. We conducted over 650 missions, covering over 550 miles throughout the state of Florida. What we did is we actually pre-deployed our teams in strategic positions throughout the state. So we had teams deployed, if you're familiar with Florida, as far north as Jacksonville, as far south as south of Miami in the Homestead area. So all up and down the East Coast, and then also on the West Coast, as far south as Naples, up to the Sarasota, Bradenton area. What that allowed us to do is to have our teams in pre-positioned areas. They then were able to quickly respond once the hurricane had passed. So they actually rode out the storm in buildings and structures that were capable to withstand, very intense Category 5 hurricanes. And so we did ride out the storm. We ran, and myself and one of my other staff members were the incident commanders from our side of the house. And we facilitated our fixed base operations from Fort Lauderdale, because initially that's where the eye of the storm was going to be hitting. Last minute, that obviously ended up shifting, came around and impacted in the Naples area. So on the West Coast, very south, but we still saw a significant amount of damage throughout the state. And so we were running fixed base operations from Fort Lauderdale, obviously monitoring all of our teams. We had several hotel rooms set up as basically mobile tactical operations centers. And then once the storm passed and we were able to safely navigate the roadways and things like that, we deployed in one of our mobile command centers and could then operate out in the field, which is the photo that you see here. So the screen in the back, we basically were able to monitor where all of our staff was throughout the state of Florida. We had the video feeds coming in and into our mobile command center, both LTE systems, satellite capabilities, and a lot of just different systems that we can monitor the different drone feeds and obviously communicate with our staff as needed. The things that were primary was getting obviously power restored, getting the utilities back online. Why that was so important was obviously we had millions and millions of people without power. And obviously this affects, not only, communications from, cell towers to hospitals, different, government buildings and things like that. There's generators and such, but obviously if you have challenges getting those fueled and such, which fuel became a major issue during Hurricane Irma, actually getting just fuel into the state and getting it to the areas that were affected so the responders could respond appropriately. One of the things that I think where the drone really just excelled tremendously was deploying in inaccessible areas. So traditionally with, natural disasters and utilities that are responding to those instances and deploying their response crews to get infrastructure back up, traditionally when they came upon an inaccessible area, that was marked on a software application, and then they moved on because it was inaccessible. So what during Hurricane Irma and having our 22 teams out there deployed, what it allowed us to do was when an inaccessible area came up, we could actually in real time get to that area. We could then fly the drone. We can assess what damage, what fuses were damaged, what transformer boxes, what type of line, all that stuff. Then that could then be communicated back to the appropriate utility incident command centers, and then they could deploy the proper repair equipment and repair crews that were needed. So it proved to be very successful, and actually it expedited the restoration process by days. And in talking to some of the president and CEOs of some of the different utilities that we were working with, they were just in shock and awe given the success of how the drone was integrated into these operations. So one of the things that we talk about is as well within critical infrastructure is airspace protection. And that has become a much bigger topic over the past several years, looking at how obviously there's the benefit to drones, but sometimes we have actors, nefarious actors, things of that nature, people that want to take good technology and use it in a malicious manner. So having a airspace protection system in place, which we've been providing those for quite a few years now to critical infrastructure, stadiums, different types of security operations, government, and public safety entities and things of that nature, is a very important thing to look at. And having done a variety of different security assessments at different facilities, and in talking to security staff, a lot of times the standard security metrics that are put in place at a facility, a lot of times don't take into account how they're going to address a threat with a drone over their facility. And nowadays, there's obviously a lot of different things, in not only just visually that a drone can fly over a facility and see visually with their camera, but also different sensors and things of that nature that could be put on to potentially compromise cybersecurity and things of that nature. And so we've been providing different systems, and there's really kind of five layers to when we look at airspace protection. And there's detect, locate, identify, track, and then mitigate. Having different systems in place, and we have a variety of different systems that we provide as a company, but getting those and really identifying over your facility and seeing what type of drones are out there, what type of drones are potentially flying over your facility, because we've done different tests with this with security folks on the ground where we don't advise them that a drone's flying over. And we kind of wait to, we red team them to see, hey, are they going to identify this? And the reality is a lot of times they can fly at altitudes that you're not going to, necessarily hear it or see it. And you've got, maybe a roving security patrol that's in a vehicle with a radio going off and these other things that really, without having technology in place, they're not going to see it. And I want to just kind of flip it over to for a minute to John, that's had, some of this technology at his facility, and maybe kind of talk about, some of the benefits and pros and cons to having that.
Yeah, so we've had an aeroscope system on our site for right about a year now, and it is eye-opening on how many drones are actually up in the airspace. We have used the system through the alerts that we got to go and intercept, a few hobbyists were claiming that they were just, they like taking pictures of refineries and, post it on their website. And so, with this system, not only do you know where the drone is flying, the altitude, the serial number of the drone, but you also get information of where the controller is. So with this system, you're able to notify your local PD, tell them you have an unauthorized drone flying, in my case, critical infrastructure, and, which is now in the state of Texas a state jail felony. You can give them the exact location of where the pilot is. And, we were one of the first to test, to see if the local DA would take the state jail felony, which they didn't. But just right off the bat, the range, you can get put into a network of these systems. So if some of your neighbors have these systems, that has the ability to go into a network. So basically, through my system that I can monitor here at my desk, or that is monitored 24/7 at my security center, any alerts that pop up, for our Pacific alert zone, we get text and emails, and then, anything else that's just out there flying, I can pretty much monitor the entire Houston ship channel for any drone traffic. The effectiveness of the system is so good that even the local FAA folks over policies and procedures have contacted me and asked me about the system, and they've inquired on their own. I've had the Homeland Security Division of Texas DPS call me and asked if I had noticed a Pacific serial number flying around our site, and I was able to tell them not only yes, but I can tell you exactly who that is because I've already been out there and talked to them. And they said, oh, well, we've noticed, we've gotten reports, that they were doing something over Exxon Mobil. I was like, well, yeah, I did see that. Do you want to see exactly where they were flying over ExxonMobil? I can send you that video of the bike path. So it goes down to that detail. Not only do you get it pop up when they're in the air as soon as the drone turns on and connects with the controller, but you can go into reports and you can see, over and over where they were flying, exactly the height, the speed, excellent system. I haven't seen any cons yet.
Thanks, John, for that insight in that system that you've got in place. And I think John touched on a lot of different points that really are extremely valuable. Is getting that insight. Being able to actually see what's out there. And I think his comment about eye-opening, that's honestly probably the standard verbiage that we get from most people when we end up putting systems in place. It is eye-opening because a lot of times, like I said, they are flying at altitudes that you may not hear them or see them, and they're small and things of that nature. But one of the other benefits is, as John mentioned earlier, I mean, they're flying a lot of different drones as a company and as an organization. It also allows you to have some airspace, mitigation, and being able to track your own systems and being able to identify, where those were operating and making sure that, they were operating in the areas that they should be if you have different policies in place and things like that. So definitely beneficial to have something in place, and we're seeing this capability and we're deploying these type of capabilities to more and more customers. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Justin. He's going to talk about the newly released M300 and the benefits within critical infrastructure. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. So the new M300 was released not too long ago. This is a new aircraft that DJI has created specifically for critical infrastructure and public safety. It is workhorse is the best word I can use for it. I know John spoke about it a little bit, and I may bring it back to him for a couple questions here in a minute. But I just wanted to focus on a few things about this aircraft that is specific to critical infrastructure. One of the first things is smart inspection. So there's a new Waypoint system where you can basically save your waypoints. You can record live missions. So if you have power lines, if you have any kind of piping, any kind of rack systems, you can go through and set the drone to basically fly it for you, bring back that mission recording, go back and do spot checks on things that you noticed may not look correct. It's very efficient, flexible, and open. It supports third-party payloads. So if you're using different monitors for gases, anything like that, the spotlight we were talking about, it does accommodate all of those different payload options for the 300. It is a much larger waypoint database. You'll see there up to 65,000 waypoints. So you can, no matter the size of your facility, you can upload all of your specific waypoints and all of your checkpoints you need to make on certain items, whether that's items that break easily, often fail, or are required by policy to be checked on a regular basis. So one of the really cool things is the automated flight mission. So you'll see here, electrical, for example, you can, as you're going through a flight mission that you've created, if there's something that you've noticed is getting older, is getting wear or tear, you can actually create a new point of interest or a new waypoint on your system. And that way, when you go back and do the smart inspection again, you'll be able to track the progress of that aging piece or technology there that you need to check on. You're also able to pull out of the smart inspection at any point in time. If there's a safety risk, you're not going to be locked into the waypoints that were created. You can always take manual control of the drone. If there's another drone in the airspace, low-flying helicopter, if there's a major incident with a piece of machinery, you can always pull out of the smart inspection and make sure you're being safe and you're allowing others to be safe on the ground as well. Now, we talked a little bit about the AI spot checks. Basically, you can go back and save certain items. So you'll see there they're looking at some different conductors on power lines, things that often fail or that you have policies written to check a specific amount of times a year. I know John was speaking about the torch towers. That's a annual thing that they have to do. You can actually go in, you can save whatever mission it is that you've done, whatever photos you've taken, and the drone will redo that exact spot check. So it will fly the exact same mission you flew a year previous, take the exact same photos from the exact same GPS coordinates, altitude, and show you. You can literally pull up side by side what it looked like a year ago, what it looks like today, and assess any damage from that. Now, the high-res grid photo is something brand new to DJI. It's a really, really cool application, and this kind of goes into the effect with the H20T, which we'll talk about as well. the high resolution of the H20T allows you to see, whatever piece of machinery you're looking at from a certain altitude and in its full capacity. So say you're working with 40-foot tank, you can get the drone far enough out away from it to where you can get the full tank in picture, and you can take what's called a high-res grid photo. So you'll select the item, which would be that tank, and it will automatically zoom for you and take different photos of different areas of that tank and patch them together for you, creating a much more high resolution photo for you to use for inspection. I know John was talking about a little bit sending videos back to the maintenance guys who are taking care of the floating roofs. This is definitely an application for that. You could take a photo of the roof from 400 feet and see major issues that you need to take care of. But with a high-res grid photo, you can take that same photo with a much higher resolution, and that way you're going to be able to zoom in very far on your tablet or computer, whatever you're using to view these photos, and see pinholes and screws that have been dropped or debris that has collected somewhere. It's a very, very useful tool. And this all falls back to the H20T. It is an incredible camera. It has a laser rangefinder on it to mark distance from the drone. It also has the thermal capabilities. The thermal capabilities are optional. Obviously, for critical infrastructure, heat plays a lot into what you're looking for in the air. So it is a great feature. And then, of course, the zoom capabilities for that. DJI has kind of taken the best of all of their old cameras. We talked a little bit about the XT2, the Z30, and put them all into one single package. And I know John was speaking about the Spotlight. It is a great addition as well. The 300 has a dual gimbal adapter on the bottom that will hold the Spotlight and the XT2. That way, when doing night flight, obviously you have the thermal to have clear vision, but when you need to see something on the ground or even assist with lighting for guys who are actually working on the ground, it is a great tool to help your operations and to ultimately help with safety. That's all I have on the Z30. I just wanted to run through. I could go hours on the 300 on what the new capabilities of it are. It is the ultimate drone for critical infrastructure. It's great. They've worked out, exactly what they needed. I'm sure they've listened to guys like John who have used their products, and that partnership is to create aircraft that do the job that they're meant to do, and realize, all the little things that these guys have to deal with on a daily basis that this drone can handle for them. We'll go ahead and roll to some questions here. We've got a few. John, this one is for you. Also, I think we actually talked about it before we hopped on here. Is your team dedicated to flying, or do they have multi-purpose jobs?
So everyone on the team, including myself, has a full-time job, and then the drone team is a kind of a extension of our emergency response teams. So they're volunteers on our emergency response team. Just here recently, towards the beginning of this year, they kind of re-rolled my FTE position to where it's 80% drones and 20% supporting the entire security department. So that's us. That's how we do it here. I do know of other companies that they have at least one full-time person that's all they do is drones, and they have full pilots, full-time pilots, just depending on how big their program is. So that's how we work here.
Awesome, thank you. When speaking, I'm assuming this is pertaining to some of the chemicals you guys work with, as well as the flame towers. Does heat affect the distance you can be for inspection from different machinery?
So heat, yes, but the bigger one that we are looking at is the classification area. So just by the nature of the beast, different pieces of equipment, there's a range where you can't be, there's a minimum distances where you cannot be with either a cell phone or anything electronic that could cause a spark and then, a fire or something bigger than that. So that's our main focus. Of course, if we're trying to inspect a flare, It's been planned for a week or two, so operations know we're coming, and we're trying to get them to turn down the steam as low as possible, so we can, not only, get a little bit closer. We really don't have to get all that close with the capabilities of these zoom cameras, but even though we do want the steam turned down a little bit so we can kind of move in, but we already have our minimum distances that we put into our SOPs right off the bat, but it's not so much for heat. It's more because of the Class 1 Div 2 classification areas.
Awesome, thank you. We had a question about, we mentioned some of the training that we do over here at FLYMOTION, and the question was, is there a training program that is catered to critical infrastructure operations?
So we have trained a variety of different critical infrastructure end users, and that is something that we're happy to discuss. Obviously, we don't have necessarily a specific training course per se that we're putting on. Most of it has been end user driven, so they have certain requirements that they want to be, or objectives that they want to meet. And our training staff has been able to manage that appropriately. So, definitely if they're interested, would be happy to, have them reach out to us, and then we can, get a little bit more of a needs and requirement analysis done, and then identify what type of training. The thing is, obviously, we, not only have the real world operational experience, but we train a lot of different organizations around the country. Our training staff's pretty much on the road every week. And then we're in the process right now also of about 8 to 9 weeks, we'll be moving into our new headquarters that's under construction that is nearly 3 times the size of our current headquarters. And we have a very large training classroom and different props and stuff that will be set up to facilitate some of this additional type of training.
Awesome. Thank you. So now looking at a question again for John. What are you required to comply with ATEX in order to fly into a hazardous environment?
So I guess this is where I get to throw down my security guide card, and I need to explain what that means.
If the person who asked that question, feel free to explain that for us, and we'll be happy to answer it. Another question for you, John. Do you use a GIS system to interconnect your data?
No, and we fly with a US app called Kitty Hawk, and that's pretty much how our information is managed throughout Shell, is through Kitty Hawk.
Do you use kind of mapping software, 3D or maps?
Yep, so currently I do have Drone Deploy for mapping and 3D modeling. We are working, or actually our innovation and robotics SME is working with Kitty Hawk to develop a mapping software through Kitty Hawk. So it sounds like here pretty soon we'll be using Kitty Hawk for mapping.
The gentleman did clarify his question. Basically, he's asking, and I think I can actually answer this, asking if the drones are intrinsically safe. There is no official rating on the drones to be intrinsically safe. To this gentleman, I'll send you over a YouTube video. One of our trainers here at FLYMOTION actually did a test in a flammable explosive environment with propane and some different gases, and did a flammability test to see if the drone, the electricity from the drone would set off, the amount of parts per million of the propane and gases that were in that tank. It did not. It did not ignite the gaseous state, but obviously there is no specific rating on the drones. So we can't certify that at all, but there have been tests done, and I'd be happy to share those videos with you.
Yeah, so just to shortly tag on to that, anytime that we cannot stay out of the unit boundaries, we have to work underneath the hot work permit through operations, and it's because of that. There is no official intrinsically safe drone.
All right. I think that's all we have time for today. There's a couple more questions I'll be happy to answer via email. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Of course, thank you to Ryan for taking the time to be with us. And John, of course, beating the heat down there in Texas. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise. And we're happy to share this and help you share this to others and hopefully grow the acceptance of drones and drone work in critical infrastructure. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for the invite.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Stay safe and have a great day.
Thanks, Jess.